In the small town of Willow Creek, life was simple and predictable. People went about their days with familiar routines, finding joy in the little things that made their community unique. One of those things was the annual dart tournament, a tradition that brought everyone together. It wasn't just a game, it was an event. The local pub transformed into a buzzing hub of excitement, where laughter filled the air, friendly rivalries sparked heated debates, and champions were crowned. Every year, the same group of players showed up, seasoned veterans who had been throwing darts for decades. They knew every trick in the book, and their confidence radiated as they walked into the pub, carrying their custom-made dart cases like prized possessions. These players weren't just competitors. They were legends in their own right, celebrated by the townsfolk for their skill and dedication to the sport. But this year, something, or rather someone, unexpected entered the scene. Her name was Clara Bennett, and she wasn't your typical dart player. In fact, no one even considered her a player until the day she signed up for the tournament. Clara lived a quiet life, working as a librarian at the town's modest library. She spent most of her days surrounded by books, helping kids find stories that sparked their imaginations, or recommending novels to regular patrons. To the people of Willow Creek, Clara was dependable, kind, and utterly unremarkable when it came to anything outside of literature. It all started when Clara overheard her neighbor talking about the upcoming tournament. He mentioned how much fun it was and joked that anyone could join, even bookworms. Something about his words stuck with her. Maybe it was the challenge, or maybe it was curiosity tugging at her heartstrings. Whatever it was, Clara decided on a whim to sign up. After all, what did she have to lose? She'd never played competitively before, but the idea of trying something completely new excited her. When Clara arrived at the registration desk, the room fell silent for a brief moment. The organizers exchanged puzzled glances, unsure if they should take her seriously. Then came the murmurs. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, followed by louder laughs. Someone joked, "What's next? Are we inviting the knitting club, too?" Another chimed in, "I bet she'll miss the board entirely." Even the reigning champion, a brash man known for his sharp tongue, couldn't resist joining in. "Let me guess," he said with a smirk. "You're here because you read a book about darts?" Clara didn't argue. Instead, she smiled politely, ignoring the snide remarks. Deep down, though, the comments stung. Part of her wondered if she'd made a mistake. What business did she have stepping into a world dominated by experts? She wasn't trained, and she certainly didn't belong to their tight-knit circle. But another part of her refused to back down. She hadn't come to prove herself to anyone. Not yet, anyway. She'd come to try something different, to step out of the shadows of her routine life and see what lay beyond. As the hours passed, Clara watched the other players warm up. Their movements were fluid, practiced, almost artistic. They talked strategy, shared tips, and laughed loudly, clearly comfortable in their element. Clara stood quietly in the corner, clutching her borrowed set of darts. She felt out of place, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Yet amidst the chaos of jeers and jokes, a spark of determination ignited within her. Maybe she wouldn't win. Maybe she'd embarrass herself. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was taking the first step. The tournament began, and the energy in the room shifted. Players took turns stepping up to the line, showcasing their skills while the audience cheered them on. When Clara's name was called, the noise died down. Everyone turned to look at her, some curious, others amused. There was a collective hush, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting to witness the inevitable failure of the simple woman who dared to enter their sacred competition. Clara approached the throwing line slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She gripped the dart tightly, feeling its weight in her hand. For a moment, she closed her eyes, blocking out the whispers and skeptical stares. When she opened them again, her focus zeroed in on the bullseye. Time seemed to slow as she steadied her arm, aimed carefully, and released the dart. It flew through the air in a smooth arc, landing with a satisfying thud, right in the center of the board. The room erupted into gasps. Some spectators exchanged wide-eyed glances, unable to believe what they'd just seen. Others burst into nervous laughter, convinced it must have been pure luck. Even the commentator stumbled over his words, struggling to make sense of the unexpected turn of events. Clara, however, remained calm. Without hesitation, she picked up her second dart, repeated the process, and hit the bullseye again, and then the third. By the end of her round, Clara had achieved the highest possible score, 180 points. Silence enveloped the room once more, heavier this time, laced with disbelief and awe. No one could deny it anymore. This wasn't beginner's luck. This was skill. Pure, undeniable skill. And as Clara stepped away from the line, still wearing her quiet smile, the crowd finally understood. They had underestimated her, and now she was proving them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Word of Clara's incredible first round spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. By the time the second round began, the atmosphere at the pub was electric. Spectators packed the venue, eager to see if Clara could maintain her unbelievable performance. Some came out of curiosity, others out of disbelief, and a few simply wanted to witness history in the making. The buzz around Clara was impossible to ignore. People whispered about her mysterious talent, speculating how someone so unassuming could possess such precision and focus. As Clara prepared for her next match, she couldn't help but notice the shift in energy. Before, she had been dismissed, as a joke, a harmless outsider who wouldn't last more than a few throws. Now the room watched her every move with rapt attention. Competitors studied her technique closely, trying to figure out what made her so effective. Even the seasoned players, who usually exuded confidence, seemed uneasy whenever Clara stepped up to the line. The reigning champion, a brash and competitive man known for his sharp tongue, grew increasingly agitated. He prided himself on being the best player in Willow Creek, and now this quiet woman, this bookworm as he'd mockingly called her, was threatening his title. At first he tried to brush off her success as beginner's luck, but after watching her hit bullseye after bullseye with calm precision, he couldn't deny that there was something extraordinary about her. Still, instead of admitting it, he doubled down on his mocking tone. During a break between rounds, he approached Clara with a smirk. "So," he said loudly enough for those nearby to hear, "how many books did you read to learn how to throw darts like that? Or are you just getting lucky?" Clara looked up from adjusting her darts and met his gaze steadily. Her expression didn't change. She neither smiled nor frowned. "I'm not here to compete with anyone," she replied softly but firmly. "I'm just here to play." Her response only fueled his frustration. To him, her humility felt like a challenge, an insult even. How dare she act so casual while effortlessly stealing the spotlight? Determined to reclaim his dominance, he vowed to crush her in the later stages of the tournament, if she made it that far. But Clara wasn't letting the pressure get to her. At least, not completely. Sure, the weight of everyone's expectations was starting to sink in. She could feel dozens of eyes on her whenever she stepped up to throw. Every dart she released carried the burden of proving herself all over again. Yet, despite the mounting tension, Clara found moments of peace amidst the chaos. Between rounds, she retreated to a quiet corner of the pub, sipping water and focusing on her breathing. She reminded herself why she'd entered the tournament in the first place. Not to win or impress anyone, but to embrace a new experience. That mindset helped her stay grounded when the competition grew tougher. In the second round, Clara faced opponents who were no longer underestimating her. They adapted their strategies, forcing her to adjust her approach. One player deliberately aimed for low-scoring areas early in the game, hoping to throw Clara off balance by making her chase higher scores later. Another tried to psych her out by engaging in small talk during her turns, hoping to break her concentration. At times, Clara faltered. A stray dart missed its mark, drawing murmurs from the crowd. For a brief moment, doubt crept into her mind. Was she truly good enough to keep going? Could she handle the pressure of competing against players who had spent years honing their craft? Each throw felt heavier than the last, and the stakes seemed impossibly high. Yet even in those moments of uncertainty, Clara refused to give up. Instead, she leaned into her instincts. She remembered the hours she'd spent practicing alone, visualizing each shot before releasing the dart. She recalled the joy she'd felt when she first decided to enter the tournament, the thrill of stepping outside her comfort zone, and slowly, piece by piece, her confidence returned. By the end of the second round, Clara had proven herself once again. Though she didn't achieve another perfect score, her consistency impressed even the Yao skeptics. She advanced to the next stage of the tournament, leaving behind whispers of admiration and a growing sense of unease among her competitors. As the evening drew to a close, Clara sat quietly at a table near the back of the pub. Around her, the noise of celebration filled the air. Players congratulated one another on narrow victories, while spectators debated which matchups would be the most exciting in the coming days. Clara listened to the chatter without saying much. She sipped her drink thoughtfully, reflecting on everything that had happened since she signed up for the tournament. She hadn't expected any of this. Not the jeers, not the cheers, and certainly not the sheer intensity of competing against some of the best players in town. Yet here she was, still standing, still playing, still surprising everyone, including herself. As she glanced around, the room taking in the lively scene, Clara realized something important. The tournament wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about courage. About stepping into the unknown and embracing whatever came your way. With that thought in mind, Clara stood up, gathered her things, and headed home. Tomorrow would bring another round, another challenge. But for now, she allowed herself a small smile. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd already won something far greater than a trophy, the chance to discover a part of herself she never knew existed. By the third round of the tournament, Clara had become the talk of Willow Creek. People couldn't stop discussing her unexpected rise in the competition. The story of the simple woman who silenced critics with a perfect score in her very first round had spread far beyond the pub walls. Locals debated endlessly about how she managed to play so well. Some speculated that she must have secretly practiced for years, while others joked that she might be some kind of hidden prodigy. A few even suggested she'd made a deal with fate, or maybe just bought a lucky charm. But no matter what people said, one thing was clear. Clara wasn't going anywhere. She kept advancing through the rounds, steadily proving herself against opponents who were now taking her seriously. Gone were the snickers and dismissive remarks. Instead, there was a mix of admiration, curiosity, and, for some, a growing sense of unease. The reigning champion in particular seemed more rattled with each passing day. His confidence, once unshakable, was starting to crack under the pressure of facing someone he hadn't anticipated. The tension between Clara and the champion reached its peak during the third round. Their paths finally crossed in a head-to-head match that everyone had been waiting for. The room buzzed with excitement as spectators packed in tightly, eager to see how this clash of opposites would unfold. On one side stood the brash, loudmouthed champion who thrived on intimidation and flashy throws. On the other was Clara, quiet, composed, and seemingly unfazed by the chaos around her. When the match began, the champion came out swinging. Literally. He threw his darts with aggressive force, aiming for high-risk shots that could either skyrocket his score or leave him vulnerable if they missed. His strategy was designed to overwhelm Clara, to make her doubt herself and crumble under the pressure. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. The champion hit a series of impressive shots, drawing cheers from the crowd. Clara, meanwhile, struggled to find her rhythm. One dart landed slightly off target and another grazed the edge of the board. Whispers rippled through the audience. Was this the beginning of her downfall? But Clara didn't let the missteps shake her. Instead, she took a deep breath, stepped back, and reminded herself of the lessons she'd learned along the way. This wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. With renewed focus, she adjusted her stance, steadied her arm, and released her next dart. It soared straight into the triple 20 segment of the board, earning her a burst of applause. Encouraged by the small victory, Clara continued, finding her groove again. Her throws weren't flashy or dramatic, but they were precise, each one carefully calculated to chip away at the champion's lead. As the match wore on, The champion's frustration became impossible to hide. He started taking bigger risks, throwing harder and faster in an attempt to widen the gap between them. But his desperation only led to mistakes. Missed shots piled up, and his earlier confidence turned into visible irritation. At one point, after narrowly missing the bullseye, he muttered something under his breath and slammed his fist on the table. The crowd fell silent for a moment, unsure of how to react. This wasn't the champion they were used to seeing, the cocky, untouchable player who always seemed to come out on top. This was a man losing control, unraveling under the weight of unexpected competition. Clara, on the other hand, remained calm throughout. She didn't gloat when the champion faltered, nor did she flinch when the crowd erupted into cheers for her. Every throw was deliberate, every movement steady. Even when the champion tried to rattle her with taunts or exaggerated celebrations after a good shot, she stayed focused. There was a quiet strength in her demeanor, a resilience that spoke louder than any boastful words ever could. By the final stretch of the match, the score was neck and neck. Both players had their eyes on the prize, knowing that a single mistake could cost them everything. When it was the champion's turn to throw, the tension in the room was almost unbearable. He hesitated for a moment, gripping the dart tightly as sweat beaded on his forehead. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent the dart flying toward the board. It hit, but not where he intended. Instead of landing in the center, it grazed the outer edge, leaving him vulnerable. Now it was Clara's turn. The entire room held its breath as she stepped up to the line. She closed her eyes briefly, blocking out the noise and focusing solely on the task ahead. When she opened them again, her gaze locked onto the bullseye. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her arm, aimed, and released the dart. It sailed through the air in a smooth arc, landing exactly where she wanted it to, dead center. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and whistling as Clara calmly retrieved her remaining darts and finished the round. The final score confirmed what many had already guessed. Clara had won. Not just the match, but the respect of everyone watching. Even the champion, who had spent days mocking her, couldn't deny her skill. As they shook hands at the end of the match, he muttered begrudgingly, "You earned it." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Clara smiled softly, thanking him before stepping away from the line. That night, as Clara walked home, she reflected on everything that had happened. The tournament had pushed her to her limits, testing not only her skill, but also her patience and determination. She'd faced ridicule, doubt, and fierce competition, and yet she'd persevered. More importantly, she'd discovered something within herself, a quiet strength she hadn't known existed. Winning felt good, of course, but it wasn't the victory itself that mattered most. It was the journey, the courage to step outside her comfort zone and embrace whatever came her way. As she unlocked the door to her house and stepped inside, Clara allowed herself a moment of pride. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new matches, and perhaps even tougher opponents. But for now, she was content knowing that she'd proven something. Not just to the people of Willow Creek, but to herself. And sometimes that was the greatest win of all. The fourth round of the tournament was unlike anything Clara had experienced so far. By now, she wasn't just a surprise contender, she was a force to be reckoned with. Word of her consistent performance had spread beyond Willow Creek, drawing curious onlookers from neighboring towns. The pub, usually cozy and familiar, felt more like a packed arena, buzzing with excitement and anticipation. Spectators craned their necks to catch a glimpse of her every move, while seasoned players watched intently, analyzing her technique and strategizing how to counter it. For Clara, the growing attention was both exhilarating and overwhelming. She'd entered the tournament as a quiet observer of life, content to blend into the background. Now she found herself at the center of everyone's focus, the subject of admiration, speculation, and even envy. Some people praised her humility and determination, calling her an inspiration. Others whispered behind her back, questioning whether her success was too good to be true. A few competitors, desperate to explain her unexpected rise, accused her of having hidden training or secret coaching. Clara heard the rumors but chose not to engage. Instead, she kept her head down, focusing on what mattered most, playing her best game. But staying focused wasn't easy. As the rounds progressed, the competition became fiercer. Opponents who once dismissed her now studied her every throw, adjusting their strategies to exploit any perceived weakness. One player deliberately slowed down the pace of the match, forcing Clara to wait longer between throws in an attempt to disrupt her rhythm. Another tried to distract her by striking up conversations mid-game, hoping to break her concentration. Each new tactic tested Clara's resolve, pushing her to adapt quickly and think on her feet. Despite these challenges, Clara continued to perform well. Her scores remained solid, though not always perfect. There were moments when doubt crept in, especially after a missed shot or a close call. During one particularly tough match, Clara struggled to regain her footing after a string of low-scoring throws. The crowd grew restless, sensing her hesitation. Even the commentator paused, awkwardly unsure of what to say. It was clear that Clara was human, capable of mistakes just like anyone else. After the match ended, with Clara narrowly advancing to the next round, she retreated to a quiet corner of the pub to collect her thoughts. She sat alone, sipping water and staring at the floor, replaying the game in her mind. What had gone wrong? Why hadn't she been able to shake off the pressure? For the first time since the tournament began, Clara questioned whether she truly belonged in this world of competitive darts. Maybe she'd gotten lucky earlier, riding a wave of beginner's fortune that was finally starting to fade. Maybe she'd pushed herself too far out of her comfort zone, only to realize she didn't have what it took to go all the way. Her doubts deepened as she walked home that evening. The streets of Willow Creek were quiet, the noise of the pub fading into the distance. Clara's footsteps echoed softly against the pavement as she replayed the day's events in her mind. She thought about the jeers she'd endured at the start of the tournament, the awe that followed her first perfect score, and the mounting pressure she now faced with each passing round. Had she bitten off more than she could chew? Was it possible to keep going, knowing that the stakes would only get higher? As she reached her front door, Clara hesitated. For a moment, she considered staying inside the next day, skipping the tournament altogether. After all, no one would blame her for bowing out gracefully. She'd already accomplished so much, far more than anyone expected. But something stopped her from turning away. Deep down, she knew she couldn't quit. Not yet. Not because she wanted to win, but because she owed it to herself to see this journey through to the end. That night, unable to sleep, Clara stepped outside onto her porch and gazed up at the stars. The cool night air calmed her racing thoughts, allowing her to reflect on why she'd entered the tournament in the first place. She hadn't come seeking fame or recognition. She'd simply wanted to try something new. To step outside the predictable rhythm of her daily life and embrace a challenge that scared her. And somewhere along the way, she'd discovered a strength she never knew she had. A quiet resilience that refused to give up, even when things got hard. Clara smiled faintly, remembering the joy she'd felt during those early rounds. The thrill of hitting her first bullseye, the sense of accomplishment after winning a tough match, the camaraderie of sharing laughs with fellow players. All of it had reminded her of what made life worth living. It wasn't about being the best or proving anything to anyone. It was about taking risks, learning from failures, and finding beauty in the process. With renewed clarity, Clara returned to the tournament the following day, ready to face whatever came her way. She greeted her opponents with the same polite smile she'd worn from the beginning, refusing to let the weight of expectations define her. When her turn came to throw, she blocked out the noise, focusing solely on the board ahead. With each dart she released, Clara reminded herself of the lessons she'd learned, that success wasn't measured by perfection, but by perseverance. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to keep moving forward despite. By the end of the fourth round, Clara had secured her spot in the semifinals. Though she didn't dominate every match, her consistency earned her respect from even the harshest critics. The reigning champion, still smarting from his earlier loss, avoided making direct comments about her, but couldn't hide his frustration whenever her name was mentioned. Other players openly acknowledged her skill, some even congratulating her on her impressive run. As Clara packed up her darts after another long day, she felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond the scoreboard. Winning was nice, of course, but it wasn't the only thing keeping her going. Every match taught her something new, not just about darts, but about herself. She was learning to trust her instincts, to stay calm under pressure, and to find joy in the simple act of trying her best. These lessons were worth far more than any trophy. On her walk home, Clara passed by the library where she worked. The building stood tall and welcoming, its windows glowing softly in the twilight. For a moment, she paused, imagining the stories waiting inside. Tales of adventure, struggle, and triumph. In many ways, her own story mirrored those books. Unpredictable, full of twists and turns, but ultimately driven by the courage to keep turning the page. Clara smiled to herself, feeling a spark of excitement for what lay ahead. The tournament wasn't over yet, and neither was her journey. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd face it with the same quiet determination that had brought her this far. The semifinals of the tournament arrived with an intensity that made the earlier rounds feel like practice matches. The stakes were higher, the crowd larger, and the pressure almost suffocating. Clara had come so far, farther than anyone, including herself, ever expected, and now she stood one step away from the final showdown. But standing between her and that coveted spot was a player known for his razor-sharp focus and unrelenting determination. He wasn't the reigning champion, but he might as well have been. His reputation in Willow Creek was legendary. He'd placed second in the tournament 3 years in a row, always falling just short of victory. This year, everyone could see the fire in his eyes. He wasn't just playing to win, he was playing to prove something. When Clara stepped up to face him, the room buzzed with anticipation. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, eager to witness what promised to be one of the most thrilling matches of the tournament. Some whispered bets under their breath, while others simply stared, mesmerized by the unlikely clash unfolding before them. On one side was the quiet librarian who had defied all odds to reach this point. On the other was a seasoned competitor whose skill and grit had earned him respect across the region. It was a battle of contrasts, calm versus chaos, precision versus power, humility versus ambition. The match began with both players exchanging strong throws, each trying to assert dominance early on. The opponent came out aggressively, aiming for high-risk shots designed to intimidate Clara and force her into making mistakes. His confidence was palpable, his movements sharp and deliberate. Every time he hit a triple 20 or bullseye, the crowd erupted into cheers, fueling his energy even further. For a moment, it seemed like Clara might falter under the weight of his performance. Her first few throws weren't perfect. They landed close to the target but lacked the pinpoint accuracy she'd shown in previous rounds. But Clara didn't let the initial setbacks rattle her. Instead, she took a deep breath and reminded herself of everything she'd learned throughout the tournament. She focused on her rhythm, blocking out the noise around her. Slowly, steadily, she began to find her groove again. One dart after another sailed through the air, landing exactly where she intended. With each successful throw, the tension in the room grew thicker. The audience alternated between cheering wildly and holding their breath, unsure of who would emerge victorious. As the match wore on, the scores remained neck and neck. Either player gave an inch, each determined to outlast the other. The opponent's aggressive strategy started to backfire, leading to missed shots that left him vulnerable. Meanwhile, Clara's consistency became her greatest weapon. She didn't aim for flashy throws or risky maneuvers. Instead, she stuck to what worked, methodically building her score with steady, reliable hits. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with her opponent's growing frustration, which became evident in his increasingly erratic throws. By the final stretch of the match, the outcome hung precariously in the balance. Both players were exhausted, their hands trembling slightly from hours of gripping darts and releasing them with precision. The opponent threw first, attempting a daring shot at the bullseye. The dart grazed the edge, leaving him dangerously close to losing his lead. Now, it was Clara's turn. The entire room fell silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, amplifying every sound. Clara approached the line slowly, her expression unreadable. She closed her eyes briefly, visualizing the shot she needed to make. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she released the dart. It soared through the air in a smooth arc, landing dead center, a perfect bullseye. The crowd exploded into cheers, some people jumping to their feet in disbelief. Even the opponent couldn't hide his shock, though he quickly masked it with a forced smile. As the referee announced Clara as the winner, the reality of her achievement sank in. She had done it. Against all odds, she had made it to the finals. After the match, Clara retreated to a quiet corner of the pub, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. Joy, relief, and pride mingled with a lingering sense of disbelief. How had she gotten here? Just weeks ago, she was an outsider, mocked and underestimated by nearly everyone. Now she was preparing to face the reigning champion in the ultimate test of skill and nerve. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying. As word spread about Clara's victory in the semifinals, the town buzzed with excitement. People lined up to congratulate her, shaking her hand and patting her on the back. Some expressed admiration for her humility and grace under pressure, while others marveled at her ability to stay composed in such a high-stakes environment. Even those who had doubted her at the beginning of the tournament couldn't deny her talent now. Clara accepted their praise graciously, though she still felt uneasy being the center of attention. She wasn't used to being celebrated, and the spotlight felt heavy on her shoulders. That night, as Clara sat alone in her living room, she reflected on how much had changed since she signed up for the tournament. What had started as a lighthearted decision to try something new had turned into a journey of self-discovery. Along the way, she'd faced ridicule, doubt, and intense competition. But she'd also found strength, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose. Winning wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about proving something to herself. She'd stepped out of her comfort zone, embraced the unknown, and discovered a part of herself she never knew existed. Still, Clara knew the hardest challenge lay ahead. Facing the reigning champion in the finals wouldn't be easy. He was brash, confident, and desperate to reclaim his title. She imagined the pressure would be immense, not just from him, but from the entire town watching. Would she be able to handle it? Could she maintain the same level of focus and composure that had brought her this far? To prepare, Clara spent the next day practicing at home. She set up a makeshift dartboard in her backyard, throwing shot after shot until her arm ached. Each throw helped her clear her mind, allowing her to focus solely on the task ahead. When fatigue set in, she paused to stretch, drinking water and reminding herself why she was doing this. It wasn't for glory or recognition. It was for the simple joy of playing, of embracing a challenge that pushed her beyond her limits. On the morning of the finals, Clara woke up early, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made her feel comfortable yet confident. As she walked to the pub, she noticed the streets were unusually busy. People gathered outside, chatting animatedly about the upcoming match. A group of kids waved at her enthusiastically, shouting, "Good luck!" Clara smiled, touched by their support. For the first time, she realized how much her journey had inspired others, not just in Willow Creek, but beyond. When she entered the pub, the atmosphere was electric. The room was packed, with barely enough space to move. Spectators craned their necks to catch a glimpse of her, while photographers snapped pictures from every angle. The reigning champion stood nearby, looking as cocky as ever. He smirked when he saw Clara, clearly confident that he would reclaim his throne. But Clara didn't let his attitude faze her. She focused on the board ahead, visualizing the shots she needed to make. As the announcer introduced the finalists, the noise in the room reached a fever pitch. Clara took her place at the line, gripping her darts tightly. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was calm. She reminded herself of everything she'd been through to get here, the laughter, the doubts, the victories, and the struggles. No matter what happened next, she knew she'd already won something far greater than any trophy. The courage to take a chance, to embrace the unknown, and to discover what she was truly capable of. With that thought in mind, Clara stepped up to the line, ready to face whatever came her way. The day of the finals had finally arrived, and the energy in Willow Creek was electric. The pub, already packed to the brim, buzzed with anticipation as people waited for the ultimate showdown between Clara and the reigning champion. For weeks, everyone had been talking about this moment, the quiet librarian versus the brash, larger-than-life figure who had dominated the tournament for years. It felt like more than just a game. It was a clash of personalities, styles, and stories. The room was so full that some spectators stood on chairs or craned their necks to get a better view. Even those who didn't usually follow darts had shown up, drawn by the drama unfolding before them. When Clara stepped into the spotlight, the crowd erupted into cheers. She looked smaller somehow amidst all the noise, her calm demeanor standing, in stark contrast to the chaos around her. Her opponent, on the other hand, exuded confidence. He swaggered to his spot at the line, throwing smug glances at Clara as if to remind her, and everyone else, of his status as the undisputed king of the board. But Clara didn't flinch. She simply nodded politely when the referee called their names, keeping her focus sharp and her expression steady. The match began with both players exchanging strong throws, each trying to set the tone early on. The champion came out swinging, aiming for high-risk shots designed to dazzle the crowd and intimidate Clara. His first dart landed perfectly in the triple 20 section, drawing loud applause. He turned to Clara with a smirk, clearly expecting her to falter under the pressure. But Clara didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she took a deep breath, blocked out the noise, and released her own dart. It hit its mark with precision, earning her murmurs of admiration from the audience. As the rounds progressed, the tension in the room grew thicker. Both players were evenly matched, trading blows like skilled boxers in a ring. The champions' flashy throws continued to impress, but they also carried risks. More than once he missed his target entirely, leaving gaps in his score that Clara quickly exploited. Her strategy was simple yet effective: stay consistent, avoid unnecessary risks, and let her opponent's mistakes work in her favor. With each throw, she chipped away at his lead, slowly but surely gaining ground. By the final stretch of the match, the scores were tied, and the entire room seemed to hold its collective breath. Every throw mattered now, every decision carrying the weight of the championship. The champion went first, attempting a bold shot at the bullseye. The dart grazed the edge, leaving him dangerously close to losing his advantage. Now it was Clara's turn. As she approached the line, the silence in the room was deafening. Spectators leaned forward, their eyes glued to her every movement. Clara closed her eyes for a brief moment, visualizing the shot she needed to make. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she released the dart. It soared through the air in a smooth arc, landing dead center, a perfect bullseye. The room exploded into cheers, some people jumping to their feet in disbelief. Even the champion couldn't hide his shock, though he quickly masked it with a forced smile. As the referee announced Clara as the winner, the reality of her achievement sank in. She had done it. Against all odds, she had defeated the reigning champion and claimed the title. But Clara's reaction wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of celebrating wildly or basking in the glory of her victory, she simply smiled softly, looking almost surprised herself. When the champion extended his hand to congratulate her, she shook it warmly, thanking him for a hard-fought match. Her humility only added to the admiration pouring in from the crowd. People cheered not just for her skill, but for her grace and sportsmanship. After the match ended, Clara found herself surrounded by well-wishers eager to shake her hand or share a kind word. Some praised her incredible talent, while others marveled at her ability to remain calm under such immense pressure. A few even admitted they had doubted her at the start, but now considered her an inspiration. Clara listened to their words with gratitude, though she still felt uneasy being the center of attention. She wasn't used to this kind of praise, and the spotlight felt heavy on her shoulders. Still, she accepted it graciously, knowing it was part of the experience. That evening, as Clara walked home, She reflected on everything that had happened since she signed up for the tournament. What had started as a lighthearted decision to try something new had turned into a journey of self-discovery. Along the way, she'd faced ridicule, doubt, and fierce competition, but she'd also found strength, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose. Winning the tournament wasn't just about proving herself to others, it was about proving something to herself. She'd stepped out of her comfort zone, embraced the unknown, and discovered a part of herself she never knew existed. In the days that followed, life in Willow Creek began to change, for Clara and for the town itself. Inspired by her story, more people started showing interest in darts, signing up for local leagues or organizing casual games at the pub. Clara, ever humble, began hosting free workshops at the library, teaching beginners the basics of the game and encouraging them to pursue their passions, no matter how unconventional. Her classes became immensely popular, drawing participants of all ages and backgrounds. Through these sessions, Clara hoped to inspire others to take chances, embrace challenges, and discover hidden talents within themselves. Over time, the annual dart tournament evolved into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. It became less about winning and more about community, inclusivity, and the joy of trying something new. Clara's influence played a significant role in this transformation. Where once the event catered primarily to seasoned players, it now welcomed newcomers with open arms. People of all skill levels joined in, eager to celebrate the spirit of the game rather than just compete for trophies. For Clara, the greatest reward wasn't the trophy or the accolades. It was the connections she made along the way. She formed friendships with fellow players, many of whom had initially dismissed her but later came to respect and admire her. She inspired kids at the library, helping them find courage to chase their dreams. And perhaps most importantly, she proved to herself that stepping outside her comfort zone could lead to unexpected triumphs. One quiet afternoon, as Clara sat behind the counter of the library, helping a young boy choose his first book, she smiled to herself. Life had returned to its usual rhythm, but it felt richer somehow. The tournament was over, but its impact lingered. In the laughter of children learning to throw darts, in the camaraderie of neighbors playing together, and in the countless small moments where people dared to aim for their own bullseyes in life. And as Clara watched the boy walk away with a book clutched tightly in his hands, she realized something profound. Sometimes, greatness isn't about standing out, it's about inspiring others to shine.